All right. Griffin, since this is like our second time recording, I'm just gonna skip the hellos and I'm just gonna sort of get straight into it. Yeah. So the purpose of this conversation or this video, we want to sort of go deeper into intern culture on crypto Twitter and like why crypto protocols or companies in general have intern accounts. Camp is a really interesting case study because you guys have sort of embodied the intern vibes into like the main account. Um, you know, as someone who leads marketing at Camp, it's really sort of we'd love to get your perspective on why you guys have done that and how you've done that. Do you want to sort of start off with like an intro about yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I didn't start out, in a marketing capacity really, or set out to be in crypto marketing. In a different life prior to, going full time here, I was actually in law school. Very, very different from what I'm doing today here. But in that, having to pay student loans, and survive the 3 years that is law school over here in the United States. Definitely needed some money. I was working night shifts at a hotel, which was not very fun, being security. But that led to me having a lot of free time to scroll Twitter. Got me deeper into crypto Twitter. I was used to trading and, sort of like starting to build out ideas and, what the next future of finance is going to be, very early on, like Bitcoin, early days of Ethereum. And then I got a job working as an analyst. I'd been sort of talking about crypto, starting to use Twitter to tweet a bit. Got a job as an analyst for a website called inside.com, which was run by Jason Calcanis. One of my requirements for the job was to tweet 5 times a day. And at the time I was doing maybe one, a week, 2 a week. I was very much a passive Twitter user. But through this, it sort of forced me to like, how the hell am I going to do this? How am I going to continue to post? And really getting into a habit of, building out a personal brand, but sort of learning more about, what it's like to build brands outside of just for me. And from that job, I had graduated law school and ended up sort of sticking in crypto, stayed on the, analyst side, but also leaning into social media for Amber Group, who's a market maker doing social media for them, then transitioning to being with Coinbase Ventures, helping as an analyst there. And then finally leading into my role at Camp, where I finally get to be a full-time degenerate on crypto Twitter and help lead marketing.
Perfect. I think to kind of start off, many people who kind of enter crypto and kind of get on Twitter, they're pretty confused, like what the hell's happening here? What's this kind of different characters on here? And what is this lingo and all of that? Before even diving into the intern aspect of a conversation, would love to learn like what does it even mean to understand CT culture, and how do you go about creating your voice for your intern?
Yeah, I mean, if you're jumping in for the first time, definitely going to be a bit of a culture shock. It'd be like getting dropped into a new country, without any background or information. You kind of have to sort of figure it out on your own. And I do think there's a lot of accounts that you can follow to sort of build yourself into an education. Just experiencing top level like companies, like say like if you're starting out at the Binance level, if you're just new to trading, it's an account you're going to follow. But the humor that they use bleeds you into sort of an introduction, brings you down the rabbit hole just as you follow a crypto experience. So I think you may start with the bigger companies, following something that you'd be using any day, like a SEX, maybe moving towards DEXs, and getting a better understanding. And through that sort of pipeline of how you fall into crypto brings you deeper down the crypto Twitter rabbit hole. If you're active, or just, scrolling through the timeline, you're going to be following big brands, and then you're going to be getting down to like, the really, really niche accounts, specific protocols to specific KOLs, meme accounts. And, it really just sort of like flows through. So I think anybody who's starting out on crypto Twitter is usually, starting out in crypto generally. And just through that experience, you kind of, learn how to do both. In terms of the Camp Twitter voice and how we've used this, a lot of sort of when we look at an audience about who's going to be using Camp, the focus is people who are, frankly, online quite a bit. We do, off-chain data provided on-chain And the people who are most likely going to benefit from situations like that are people who are regularly posting, regularly engaged with content in their feed and with other, developments going on Twitter and beyond. So for our voice, we look, to try to implement that same exact sort of voice. What are the, most, online users looking to do? What content are they interacting with? And sort of stemming that through, a deeply, trenched crypto Twitter, native here, finding that voice and speaking through them, because those are going to be our earliest adopters. And then more broadly beyond that to just more generally chronically online content outside of the crypto Twitter sphere, taking that, on as well through our voice and being like, how do we reach these individuals who are online? How do we grab their attention in a way that's going to be competing for, all sorts of other individuals, companies, you name it. There's so much going on the timeline. How do we get this specific audience to stop, look at our posts, and feel something in some sort of way?
No, and that makes total sense. Like, if you were to
Yeah.
sort of summarize what it means to have an intern account and why people have intern accounts or why companies run these intern accounts, that sort of makes sense. But like Griffin, traditionally, protocols usually have like separate accounts for this voice, and they usually keep like the main handle really professional and like limited to BD opportunities or announcements like that. How did you guys decide for Camp's main account to have that voice? Was it like something that you sort of just stumbled into accidentally and like it was like, okay, oh shit, this works? Or was there any thought process behind it? Like what was sort of the build up in like your guys' office? How did it go about? Tell us that story.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is sort of not taking ourselves too seriously. And I think that's a problem that a lot of protocols face. When you split that intern voice, I guess what you'd call it, and you have that compartmentalized on a separate account, you end up resulting with a bunch of very, for lack of a better word, more boring, content. And you're actually detracting from, some fun voice that you could have and like the engaging side of what you're developing by compartmentalizing with another account, at least in my opinion. I've seen a lot more traction, say like Axelar, for example, has an intern account that posts really well and they do that same sort of split voice between the two. It's not that I don't see both posts. I see the Axelar intern posting, in my For You page infinitely more than I see their main account. Even if at a time when I wasn't even following the intern, I was getting the intern content from that account. And I think that goes a long way with just sort of attention and how things are ranked in the algorithm. So when we early on started, we were looking to frankly provide, as much attention to the main project as well. And in doing that meant not running an intern account, but rather taking on a more fun and engaging voice, with our platform as opposed to, two separate entities. And if you see something like Van Eck, which is an incredibly, they would be, as a, a TradFi company, someone that you'd be looking to have like the stuffiest sort of Twitter account, the stuffiest presence, the very basic announcement structures and talking about structured products and all that. And they have adopted a voice, that is an intern voice from their main US account as well. And I think that really goes to show that like in this arena for attention that we're all fighting in, we need to find ways that are going to bring attention to what we're doing. And it could be done through two accounts, but at the end of the day, like if you're going to find more attention and success in doing things that look like an intern account, then maybe that should be a voice that you should be using for your main account as well. And that's sort of what Camp's approach was jumping into it. Again, looking for a chronically online audience, looking for those people who are most likely to use Camp first. And that's what led us into taking on the voice that we have today.
Yeah, I think that's really great to hear, and also it kind of opens up this possibility where, because the reason why most people have intern accounts is they could say what the main account can't say, and they can be more open and free. But in your case, and both of them are the same thing. So it kind of brings to where, as you're the main account and is the same thing, do you kind of anticipate any backlash when you're tweeting as this freely, or was that any part of your strategy that kind of you are noticing that you're in anything that kind of stands out?
Yeah, I guess to me it's kind of like there's some unwritten rule that I think people think in their own mind of what you can and can't say from a main account. There are obviously things that you can and can't say from, any account, generally, but I think people make up a lot more rules that they, structure based on, what their perceived notions of, what a company account should look like or a project account should look like. So in terms of backlash on that, no, that's not something that we ever really, considered, because again, these are things that are being posted regularly by accounts and by projects. They're just doing it, differently, maybe not necessarily from Maine, but, from others. But then there's countless other projects. I think, recently looking at exchanges have been pushing into this. Kraken's account, as of recently, has really been diving in, taking shots at Coinbase and making memes that, you might not necessarily would have expected from them 6-7 months ago. So I think a lot of it comes to rules that people have sort of decided, and a lot of that also comes from a culture of checks and balances. I think it drives me personally nuts when you go through 10 rounds of revisions for a tweet that you had that's maybe about something that is maybe like a 5-minute, meme or a copy pasta that's trending at the time, because not only does it just kill the joke, but it also makes it so like you either miss opportunities or it just ends up getting changed into something that, really isn't like what it set out and intended to be. There's a great example of, I think it was Amtrak's Twitter a while back. They had tweeted just the word trains, and like that was it. And it led to like this big movement of a bunch of other companies like McDonald's tweeting clown, and like a lot of just one word answers from a bunch of like traditional corporate accounts sort of, having fun making memes. And when they interviewed the Amtrak person, they said it went through 12 rounds of revisions to get and land on a single word tweet. And like they ended up finding success in it, but taking something that seriously from a corporate account. And I guess, it's very different in the traditional, their infrastructure for train lines in the United States, or even for Web 2 publicly traded companies. But at the end of the day, it's not that serious. And I think that more and more, especially in Web 3, projects are starting to understand that like that serious brand that you have and, isn't resonating with anybody that's actually using your product. And Web 2 has seen this in traditional companies for a while now, that if they're looking to tap into their audience on platforms like Twitter, where, many and most people aren't, the corporate America working, auditing or, actively, beyond the scope of just being consumers of the product, they're setting themselves up for situations where they could really resonate with an audience. And I think, in terms of backlash, people need to stop breaking down those rules that they've made for themselves, or start breaking them down, and realize that it's not that serious at the end of the day. Even if you're doing something that's serious, there's a way that you could take a voice and have fun without, materially affecting your brand identity, and can do it in a way that's positive.
And like, I think Griffin, like you mentioned that there's a line that people have established, and the checks and balances that these big companies have. How do you guys decide what's in line and what's like goes beyond? Is that something that Nirav sort of sets from the top, or is that something that you guys have decided internally? Like, how does that process work at Camper? How do you think about it?
Yeah. I think, to me, like the biggest, when I'm thinking of, content is like, at what expense is a joke being made? I think there's a high degree of, what works and what doesn't. And when you're taking shots sort of needlessly at people, or, you're taking direct positions that, have an effect on individuals, that to me is sort of crossing a line. You can be funny and have fun and make jokes, generally that aren't offensive. And this isn't a new concept to Twitter. This is sort of just like to life and, generally comedy. But like finding ways to take shots and make jokes at things that aren't like, directly impacting individuals. It could be, we can make fun of Cardano like all day, as just like a token. Like I've constantly tweeting Cardano jokes from personal, and it's like, Yeah, but it's jumping on like a broader train of, making jokes and having fun. I'm not looking at, a specific trader and, mogging them for their P&L. Like it's a very different, from a corporate account, like, who am I affecting with this joke? Like, what am I saying? And I think that's a real part internally for me on like how to come out with content in terms of, what's crossing a line, throughout the company. Nirav gives almost unlimited guidance on this. He just sort of lets things rip, which is a really good time for that. Again, like something that I've always hated making posts is when you spend too long in revisions, and he totally understands that and lets things go off the fly. There are times that I will reach out to him with a post and be like, hey, make a check on it, especially if it's going to be like a joke that's sort of on the edge. I think the biggest example I can think of as of recent is we reached 100,000 followers on the camp Twitter. We used Bonnie Blue's, 1,000 men in a day picture where she's holding up the sign with 1,000 and made it 100,000. And making an OnlyFans joke was something that, we were like, all right, this is great. And we landed on that final version just because, again, it was relevant in sort of pop culture and, something that we all thought was hilarious in the office. But there was a couple of versions of that tweet that we were looking at that I was like, okay, maybe this would be crossing a line, like going a little bit further than just, that joke on its face, and reached out to him, reached out to other people, who support with marketing. Like Charco was like, hey, like 3 versions of this tweet. Like we want to go with this angle. Which one do you think is the best, essentially? So not like censoring herself in any way, but like looking at different options, being like, hey, like we want to make a joke that goes in this direction. Here are 3 ways we're looking to do it. Not saying which one is, approvable, but like, hey, which one like do you resonate with the most? Again, to find like right where you are on that line. It's, if people are feeling a certain way about it that's negative, then that's enough to me to be like, okay, like that could be too far or could be perceived as too far, where if a lot of people find it and enjoy a specific version, yeah, like that's going to be the one that's going to work.
Got it.
And
Ha-
yeah, go ahead.
No. So I was just gonna follow up on that. Like, have you guys like ever gotten backlash on crypto Twitter so far?
There's like a few sort of like troll accounts that will like take a post and be like, how dare you? Like this is supposed to be serious. Who has, the login information to this anyway? And I think that's really fun. Almost. I know Winnie at Chipped has talked about how like her line of what's it called? The nails with the NFC chips in them. There's a group of people who follow all of her Instagram content and just talk about how like chipped is the mark of the devil. And like there's people that you're going to offend that you never know. And she was like, yeah, these people will come and comment every single time in the post talking about like how what she's building is, akin to Satanism and stuff like that. And you're going to end up offending somebody like that. And camp occasionally will see people like that. But you know what? Like in a way that's positive marketing too. These are people who are just going to, feel some sort of way that you could never even imagine. They're going to show up to every post and let you know, but it becomes almost a part of the meta itself and makes it sort of fun. Like you obviously can't stop that. There's nothing you could do. If people are going to feel that way, like let them keep engaging with your posts. Like, the more the merrier at the end of the day.
And does that, when that sort of thing happens, what's the kind of thing within the team? What does this conversation look like? And does it affect the morale in any way when you're putting all this out and the community is kind of responding in a negative or sort of way?
Yeah, I think I'm the most sort of critical. I will be the first to point out to the team when someone says something that's like, oh, how could you? And like, I'll send it near him immediately and be like, am I cooked? Is it over? Like, I totally get it. If a post isn't performing like as good as I expected to in the first 10 minutes, I'll just like tell the team, be like, hey, like, GG's, like it's been a good run. Streak's finally over. I'll start putting out applications like completely as a joke. I think, I don't think it really affects morale really at all. We have such a great small team over at camp. Everyone works together. It's not like we have BD exclusively to BD and community is just doing community and nothing else. Every single person on the camp team takes on multiple roles and works, within every single department, which is phenomenal. Like I'm getting, jokes from, the BD guys or like ideas or content that they're liking, and communities reaching out, and our own, private Telegram group, individual members within our community are reaching out being like, hey, like I love this form of content. Like, I've seen this and, think this is hilarious. So like the way that the camp team and the camp community all sort of just jumps in and works together, constantly keeps morale up. We're always finding ways to improve. And even when these negative things like occasionally do come up, we're all there for each other. It's something that like we've all, worked together on. So it doesn't dampen the mood at all. If anything, it ends up being a rallying point for the next post or, the next initiatives that we take on.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think like I know like the Hugo thing where, Hugo was fired by Susan and the whole Poly Market fiasco on Twitter was fake. But if you think about like being an intern on crypto Twitter and you cross a line, like 9 out of 10 times the intern will think that they're cooked and they're on the way out. And I've actually known interns who have gotten fired because they've crossed the line. Like if founders are listening to this sort of video, and there was something like you, Griffin, could say to founders like, hey, here's how Nerov's built the culture where the interns feel safe and we are given creative freedom. Like what sort of, responsibilities, or how does Nerov sort of structure that environment internally?
Yeah, I think Nerov's in it as much as we are a lot of the times. Like again, everyone's doing like so many different aspects within camp. Like Nerov sends me memes on a regular basis, and like we have this relationship where we could just talk about content, and we've built this trust where like I can put something out or have something loaded up that he might not understand as a joke, but he knows like I have been on crypto Twitter and up to date on what's going on, and there's a trust that's like, okay, like he hired me for a reason. Like we're working together for a reason. This is working well. I know what I'm doing. So I think to any founder who's worried about some sort of backlash that comes out of it, is they need to like have the trust, and they need to do the time themselves. Like if you are not used to crypto Twitter and you're a crypto founder and maybe you're not understanding the jokes, like that's not a reason for you to push back. You hired somebody to do marketing because they know more than you. At the end of the day, like you would be doing the job yourself if you had the opportunity and you knew as much as you did. You wouldn't have hired somebody on to assist you with it if you didn't know that you needed assistance doing it. And I think just having the faith and understanding like, hey, like this person, I decided to give them a salary, like they are a part of this team. I did this for a reason, let them cook at the end of the day. Like they should really be focused on, having team members like that. And if they want to be involved and go through it, like spend the time on crypto Twitter, spend the time having conversations with socials, like media, like don't be afraid to send memes over and get memes back. Like, cause that's how you'll learn that your content's doing well. And in the event that, there is an issue that arises, like understanding that like this whole space requires taking risks. And, that could come in a wide range of things. And there's certainly something, like trading, like you could take on far too much risk than is acceptable. And you need to understand, like, again, like seeing where the risk came, by continuing that conversation, being a part, but allowing creative freedom, is this something that like is an issue of like happenstance where, certain audiences were offended that, aren't typically there? Is this something that's generally offensive to a single person? But like by just being in the trenches a little more, and by allowing creative freedom, you get a better scope and understanding of, how to get better content that's going out, how to have trust that things are going out are going to, work. And then in the event that things go wrong, like really getting an understanding of like, to what degree was this, something taken out of context first, something that shouldn't have been out in the first place.
Yeah. And I think there was this like famous quote from the intern where he tweeted out like, if your intern doesn't make you uncomfortable all the time, like they're not doing their job. I think that sort of just teased this up really perfectly. I think Griffin, like another reason why projects want to keep the main account professional is to sort of signal to the ecosystem that they're a serious project. I want to hear from you. Like, does having sort of an unhinged Twitter account, does that affect your BD pipeline at all? Like, do people like still consider Camp as a serious ecosystem despite the Twitter?
Oh, absolutely. If anything, I found it ends up being like a foot in the door with a lot of projects. We're able to, with our account size, like be able to bring projects that are, you know, up and coming or maybe even new into building that might not have a large presence to go and sort of build in engagement for them, get something teed off. We've had projects be like, yeah, we want to work with you because of what we've seen you do on X and sort of like how you handle this. This would look great within the audience that we're trying to attract. So I think for BD, like a lot of people see like, we're building, an infrastructure for the consumer space. We're reaching out to consumers. So if you're an app that's, specifically building, in say Web3 social or, something in the consumer space, like by partnering and getting a brand partnership with us, we're creating something that the consumer audience is actually going to engage with. So we've definitely seen it as a pro for the BD pipeline. Obviously like Charco, Drew, Jaden, on our BD team, they are absolutely cracked. I feel like I could be doing the worst job on socials in the world and people would still want to work with us just at like the level that they work and, the level that they're able to sort of sell the vision of camp. But, I think having this specific presence has ended up being more of a plus for us in terms of the BD pipeline.
Yeah. And also, I want to get into the Kaito aspect of the social game on CT that we're currently seeing in the last couple of months. What are your thoughts on it? And I know that you guys have run your kind of campaign on Kaito as well. So, where do you kind of see this heading where we have this kind of gamified layer of socialify on the most, where the distribution is most for the projects? And like, how do you see yourself kind of being part of this Kaito engine that we currently have?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have some thoughts on Kaito. Obviously, we were one of the first cohort of projects to be on the Yapper leaderboard launchpad system. So it's definitely something that we've looked into. I think as a tool for really understanding community engagement, that community mindshare board is really incredible. Not just for us as a team to understand like, hey, like, what projects are interfacing with camp, but also sort of, being in a spot where we could be like, okay, where are we being heard relative to other projects? And I think that's really important to get for knowledge. I think the past week on the Yapper leaderboard competition has been very interesting. We sort of had a campaign lined up with posts, encouraging our community to vote. Looking through the metrics, obviously bigger accounts are more favored for votes. You have an X amount of yaps. And then from a personal point, I was pretty bummed. I post again 5 times a day was something that I like led with. I really like to think I'm good at this Twitter thing. I have 0 yaps as an individual account. I have not scored a single one yet. If anyone from Kaito's listening and want to unblock or unshadow ban me, that would be great. But beyond that, like we realize that our community, like a lot of our community is engaged with other communities, has yaps, and we have larger accounts, a lot of partners that we work with who are, or just friends who are looking to vote for us. But yeah, when it got down to it and we started, the amount of KOLs that started asking us for money essentially for votes was something that we kind of in the background knew was going to be a thing, but something that we had no idea how massive of a thing it was going to be. And I think it's a very interesting democratic experiment for voting. There's a lot of issues with DAOs right now that I don't agree with, like proposals and how they're getting through, in terms of influence, versus like people actually showing up to vote. And this new Kaito paradigm is really like creating a system that's, on one end, harder to just sway. It's not like whoever has the most votes. You can't just run some sort of campaign to win. Like, you have to reach out to these bigger audiences. And I think that's pretty novel and interesting. Like, finding and reaching out to people with voting power, getting a lot of people to vote goes a long way. But again, like when it comes to sort of like a payment system, and like, I don't know if like, who's doing this or what. I just know, like, I saw it all over X when Kaito launched, was like certain KOLs putting up, dollar amounts for yaps, or talking about projects reaching out, or projects reaching out to me in DM saying, hey, like,
Yeah.
$4 a yap, let's see where you end up. I just found it fascinating, and I still think Kaito's a really great product. It's something that we're really interested in. I hope we can get a community app leaderboard. I'm going to continue posting, as democratically as possible to get everyone out and vote. But I think the next couple of weeks are going to be really fascinating. It's created this almost experiment in this ecosystem. Like, is that going to last? Like, what the new meta is going to be on it? But certainly, I think that everybody at the end of the day is going to be looking to Kaito to track metas. And I think this is like just a new level of like, they have their own meta going on to track metas. It's just fascinating. It's played out really interestingly over the past week. And even in the next week, I'm looking forward to seeing like what comes next. But yes, it's something that our team is looking at highly, something that I wish I made more money on trading so I could pay for premium and get more insights on. And I think a lot of people in the industry are looking at as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I heard some people were like, why not just create a marketplace for yaps and have people bid and place and just make it as permissionless as possible. And yeah, and talking about like future of the social fire game and interns, I also want to get into the AI agents we have seen where like AI XPT, it's really good at what it does. Do you think we'll have that kind of version where projects are spinning up their own intern accounts and the intern is an AI agent?
Yeah, I mean, first off, I'm absolutely like loving sort of the AI agent sort of progression. Something that Camp's been really, monitoring and working with is, building out intellectual property for, AI agents specifically. It's really compelling to have an account that's doing really well as an individual and, training on, X data, training on, external data off chain to, create new agenic personalities for maybe these intern accounts. And I think what's really important is owning that data. And it's sort of like something that goes along with the camp vision of like your, web 2 data on chain and, taking ownership of your data. But, at the end of the day, like these models are being trained. And something that's concerning to me is a lot of them are being trained, or like these quote unquote intern accounts that, people are spinning up through virtuals or through other, systems within the ELIZA OS frameworks are being trained on either, corporate accounts that are being run by interns. They're being trained by meme accounts that would, be described as intern accounts. And like, they're, essentially just taking the work and building models off of work that's been done by others. And I think it's really important to understand that, like, yeah, this is, it's all memes and jokes and stuff, but this is like the creative process of, certain individuals. And by merely just training on their work, you're not going to be getting something that's going to be the value of, how that person thinks and what's inside their head. And I think, taking ownership of that data and having an ability to own it is incredibly important. Something that I think, Camp's looking to work towards, and something that I think, in, the world of AI generally moving forward, how your data is being used to train AI models is going to become an increasingly bigger question. And, how that affects you and, what sort of kickbacks you get as an individual, not even kickbacks, but, payment for the work and for, the intellectual property that you produced, that is just going to be consumed by models over time. But yeah, I've seen, Story Protocol, for example, they spent a week and had an AI intern, and To my knowledge, I don't think it went very well. I believe it was through Luna. And I know they were getting a lot of engagement on posts, but nothing that I was like, oh yeah, like I am cooked. This is the end of my career. I should start, looking into TradFi. Did not get that feeling at all. I think if anything, they're probably better suited for running traditional accounts. The idea of like, the logo X logo and, some sort of value prop statement as a tweet every day. These are things that I think AI would really excel at. And I think could already be doing a very good job for posting. So like sort of going back to sort of Camp's, branding and how we have a voice. It's also sort of pushing that we aren't, this isn't something that AI, some of the things that, our team thinks up that they tell me is like, hey, it's a good idea to post. I don't think an AI model could ever say something like as insane as something that Charcoal will send to me in a group chat and be like, this would be a good post, and stuff that we end up actually like putting out that is good posts. But yeah, sort of like that's sort of how I've been thinking about it. I do think there's a time that we will reach that these, agentic intern accounts, I guess you'll call them, will become very successful, just as people have looked at, agentic influencers as already having success on other platforms like Instagram. I think DeepSeek in the news was something that really shocked a lot of individuals with the sort of speed. We were getting a lot of pushback in the United States about sort of how it was trained, but at the end of the day, you can run a virtual for 20 times less on a MacBook Air than you could before. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And if you think about what that means for resources for an individual to, have several agents that are working as quote unquote interns or continuously training a model to stay up to date on the latest trends, it just got so much less expensive, so much easier to do. And I think just as we have this sort of race to the bottom on pricing for AI and on availability of architecture to actually build and train these models with, we're going to be seeing it a lot more, and it's going to be a lot better. I don't think we're quite there yet where we're going to be seeing it, but I think recent, as soon as the past week and a half, we're starting to see where this is going, and going to have to work with the reality that this will be existing, possibly in the next couple months.
100%.
Cool. No, I love all of that. And Griffin, I'm so sorry. I know we're over time. Like, just one last question. I noticed that you guys don't have like a mascot on the camp main account, and is that not part of the intern voice? Like, typically these interns have a mascot, and there's like this humanification, like persona building through that. Is that something that you guys have thought about? Like, how do you guys think about that?
So we and you're going to be seeing a lot more of them. We have Sticky over on our team. He is our campsite resident in Stick. He is going to be very much involved in the ecosystem. Really excited. We actually recently ran our campaign with Wide Worlds. That was sort of they were like an AI image generation that can build and iterate. And when we had unveiled Sticky through our Trailheads account and through our main. We created a challenge to sort of like put him, through this and generate, had basically a contest to generate, the best sort of, baby Sticky and Sticky through into the new 2025 year. Saw a lot of engagement. Like our community had some, again, great ideas of like, using this AI tool to create Sticky in these new situations. But, as the ecosystem goes and we get closer to launch, we have a lot of great initiatives where he is going to be pretty much everywhere. They're going to see, though we're not voicing, him directly as an account or like using him as a mascot, thinking like a Cyber with the rafts. Like they have this sort of situation where like the raft is now like part of their identity. Iris does a really great job with their sprites, in a degree where they take on their own voice. I think maybe closer to Iris's model, where we're going to see more of Sticky's presence in content and existing within the ecosystem. I think if you haven't seen it now, you're about to see it a lot more very soon.
Yeah, no, Iris does a great job, especially with like the graphics and visuals. And I see a lot of that more on the static side. Do you guys? Cool. No, Griffin, thanks so much for joining in. I think this is going to be really helpful for a lot of people who kind of see this, and as they think about, I'm thinking of this more as like Web2 founders who are trying to get into Web3 and they want to sort of understand crypto Twitter culture and understand how the intern voice goes. Whenever someone asks me, I'm just going to reference them this video. So yeah, thanks so much for taking out the time. And yeah, looking forward to hearing from you guys very soon and mainnet as soon as possible.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted. Yeah, you know where to find the updates. Camp Network XYZ. Thanks for having me, guys. It's been fun.
All right. Thanks, Griffin.
Cheers.
See you, man. All right.